Real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio. Live from the heart of the downtown east side, it's Talk Recovery Radio with Giuseppe Ganci and Darren Gaylor on Vancouver's Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. From the streets to the studio, bringing you addiction recovery stories from real people with lived experience and real experts on today's issues. Tune in live every Thursday, noon to 1. Powered by New West Recovery. Talk Recovery Radio.
And good afternoon, Vancouver. Hello, you're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. And here I am, Mr. Giuseppe Ganci. I don't know why I called myself Mr., but I just did, with Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren.
I think we're old enough to be Mr.
Yes. We've been on a bit of a break. I think almost a month already has gone by without live shows. Shout out to Jordan for keeping the airwaves full with some repeat shows. And I took a summer break. And when I say a summer break, because we had other work to do. But, it was nice to see you, Darren, back on the show.
Good to be here.
Good to be here. Those of you that follow us on social media and all that kind of stuff, we just finished our first round of Pride celebrations, Clean, Sober, and Proud. So we had the Pride Parade, and then we did the Sober Lounge at Vancouver Pride. It was great. Check out the photos all online. It was good to be back. We built a giant circus themed float. Hundreds of people involved, from volunteers to dancers to just marchers. So that was very impressive. People say it was the best entry in the float, but that's not why we do it.
Even though it has been over the years.
Yeah. It was definitely an opportunity to showcase fun and recovery, and an opportunity.
I was talking to some people that were there. I had a sick child. I wasn't able to make it down. But the I don't even know it's an energetic effect. I've noticed it when there's been large gatherings of people in recovery, be it at like, a stadium event, or convention. But when you take a large group of people in recovery and put them into like public, like there's noticeably like not a reaction or a response of like these must be drunk people. Like there's a difference. You can't really get it right away. Like, what is this energy? What is this excitement? Like, it's not fueled by alcohol and drugs. You can clearly get that. But people in the parade and on the float can notice a response from the crowd around them that was different from the floats in front of them. Like it's like an invitation to celebrate something that means something, and it goes so well with what Pride's all about. Like I love that there's like a noticeable exchange of a different energy with people in recovery.
Oh, for sure, definitely. And then even with the Sober Lounge afterwards, a lot of people, were walking by and they would see this party happening in the Shoppers Drug Mart parking lot, and there's just this energy and this pulsating energy going on, and then they just took it for granted that it was a bar, and some people went to the counter asking for drinks, and then that's when they realized it was a sober event. They were good at letting people know that it was a sober lounge at the door, but some people slipped through the cracks and all that kind of stuff. And so that's a nice flattering mistake. So anyway, if you missed it, don't worry. There's another event happening on August 13th. New West Pride is going to be Untoxicated, the annual big show that happens with Clean, Sober, Proud. So you can check that out at cleansoberandproud.com for tickets. Some pretty big high-end entertainers are going to be there, from our local queens to some of RuPaul drag queens. So check it out, cleansoberproud.com, August 13th at New West Pride. It's going to be the Intoxicated Festival. And Recovery Day is coming up, everybody. So check that out. Recovery Day BC, Tom Cochran, Snotty Nose Res Kids, Fred Penner is going to be there. So we got lots of stuff happening in the recovery world. So if you think recovery is boring, it's not. It's you. Do something about it and get off your couch and away from your video game and go have some fun. And if crowds aren't your thing, then volunteer. Do something that can help the events get better. So there's lots of opportunities to be part of Recovery Day, part of Clean, Sober, and Proud. So you're listening to Talk Recovery Radio, powered by New West Recovery. We come to you live when we're not on vacation every Thursday, noon to 1. Vancouver Co-op Radio is our home. We're not in studio. We haven't returned back to studio. For those of you that know where the studio is, it's right at the corner of Columbia and Hastings. So during COVID, the studio was shut down, and that's why we went into this hybrid world. Zoom, Facebook Live, and then rebroadcast. So now that the studio is open again, and Darren and I are kind of deciding whether or not we want to go back to the studio. Number one, this is a great format and it's comfortable because we get to sit at our home or at our desk. But the other piece is, I don't know how many of you have been down on Hastings, but the studio is surrounded by tents because they stopped the street cleans on Hastings. And so now there's a tent city all on the sidewalks and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, quite frankly, I don't really want to have to walk through that. Call it I just don't want to.
Yeah, it's a tough decision.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's dangerous, but I just don't want to spend my Thursdays in the middle of all of that. And I'd rather be doing other stuff. So anyway, we're bringing Talk Recovery Radio to you. We'll let you know when we're back in the studio because you'll be able to tell because we'll be in the studio. So we bring different issues. If you want to replay us though, and you're watching us on YouTube, hit subscribe or replay us on SoundCloud, iTunes, all your favorite streaming devices. That's where we're at. And you can catch all of our past shows at talkrecoveryradio.com. So I'm going to bring in our first guest today. We've got two guests later on in the second half of the show. We got Steve Hall, who's going to be talking about his personal story of addiction recovery and is a big part of the recovery community. So we'll be talking to him in the second half of the show. But our first half of the show, we wanted to have a conversation about what's going on with our neighbors in the US of A and could it be coming to Canada soon? We've got lawyer Bruce Rosenberg with us. Hello, Bruce.
Good afternoon, Giuseppe. Good afternoon, Darren.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Talk Recovery Radio. And there's a big difference between Canada and the USA. A lot of people say, but when it comes to the addiction recovery world, there really isn't much of a difference. And so we're going to talk with a lawyer who works with insurance in regards to drug addiction, substance use, rehab coverage that goes on in the States. So can you give us what's going on in the States right now and what's in place right now? Two scenarios though. I want to play the two scenario card. One, if you're rich and you have a job and you have a house with two cars in the driveway. And then the second scenario is, what happens if you're poor and you take the bus, like you don't have a car. So what is the insurance world like when somebody has addiction in the US of A?
That is a great and interesting scenario. I mean, obviously, if you have the money, you can get healthcare. But also, since the Affordable Care Act came into effect and rehab or addictions were recognized as actual essential medical benefits, it's compulsory in the United States to have rehab benefits, treatment benefits in most insurance plans. So the level of care you get is going to be based upon the plan that you have. Medicare and Medicaid obviously cover a lot of essential services. But also a lot of the Affordable Care Act plans, blue, gold, otherwise bronze, have care and services that are provided, including rehab services, either in-house or outside services. And the level of care you get is going to be based upon the plan you have, which is going to be based upon how much you pay for the plan. And based upon that, I'd say that there's actually an equality of services, because the bottom line is you can only get so many services from a facility that exists. So I think what happens is that the plans will cover a substantial portion of the cost of the care. But what you have to be careful about when you're in the middle ground or the lower ground, when you don't have a lot of money, is getting hit with the co-payments or the deductibles or the amounts that are not covered by the plans themselves. And so that's the differential. If you're really rich, you're going to have enough money to pay for those deductibles and co-payments. And if you don't have, with the burden of having to come up with payment for the difference in the care between what the plan will pay for the care and what your co-insurance or deductible is related to the plan.
So there was a movie that was out, which is ironic that it was called New West Recovery, because the community that we do our addiction treatment in is called New West Recovery. We're like, oh my goodness, that's our name. But there was that movie New West Recovery, or I can't remember what the movie was called, but it was based on a treatment center called New West Recovery. And it was about the insurance fraud that goes on in the US of A and Canada. So like people reference that all the time, rehab centers are bad because they just scam money, and that kind of paints everybody with one brush. Rehab's bad because it's greedy business. How much of that is actually true, number one? And number two, why are rehabs different than hospitals? I mean, hospital bills are enormous. They don't get a bad rap, but rehabs do. So can you help kind of, break that down? What's actually going on when it comes to rehab centers, the fraud, the insurance, that movie, how much of it was real?
I think there's a lot of reality to it. I think that as in all areas, there are going to be good providers and bad providers, and regretfully, there are a lot of bad apples and people who take advantage of situations and take advantage of people, especially if they have issues such as addictions or substance abuse problems. It's easy to take advantage of somebody, and so what they do is they trade off. They take advantage and they get paid for taking advantage. So you have to be very careful what facility and what providers you're going to for care. The reality is that what happens with the difference in cost in hospitals, et cetera, hospitals are typically contracted and have agreements with the insurance companies that condense or that specify how much payment will be received for the service, for the treatment. So if you're an inpatient in a hospital, the hospital has a specific amount that they can bill, whether it be by Medicare or by contract with a major insurance carrier, or even if you don't have an insurance policy, they will have a service fees. They have a fee schedule that they have to publish and that they charge across the board. Everybody gets charged the same amount for every single service. So when you have a private provider of services, such as these rehab centers, they set their own prices. There's no negotiation. So what happens is if the provider is not in a contractual relationship with the insurance company, meaning it's not in network, we hear that term a lot, in network or out of network. If a provider is in network, that means they have a contractual agreement with the insurance company that says if somebody comes in for a day's services or receives a certain type of treatment, they're going to get paid a specific amount under the contract for that service. When you don't have an in-network provider, that means they're out of network. And if they're out of network, they charge whatever they want. And then there's a constant dispute between the insurance carrier and the provider as to how much they should actually pay. What is the reasonable value of their services? Because the standard is not the contractual rate, but is actually what is considered reasonable charges for the service. And that's where when you have the providers that are not ethical, really raise the rates that hurt the patients, because now they're charging a very high rate, and they're getting a portion of reimbursement from the insurance, but potentially the patient is getting left with the difference in that bill. So they're getting paid from the insurance carrier, and then they're turning around, and oftentimes it's called balance billing. They're turning around, which is illegal. They're turning around and charging the patient for the difference between what they're receiving from the insurance carrier and their service charges. So the hospitals all tend to be regulated and have a set fee schedule, and they publish that fee schedule. Whereas when you're dealing with a private provider of rehab services, they don't necessarily publish their rates. They're not necessarily actually contracted with the insurance carriers. They're not necessarily in network. So it leaves the patient sort of subject to the whims. If you don't read the contract when you get involved with that provider, you can be putting yourself in a precarious position as a patient, because you really don't know how much you're going to be liable for at the end of the day after you receive your treatment.
And
Yeah.
wow, these are the people that you represent.
Yeah, well, oftentimes I represent patients who've been overbilled or have issues, or they've had bad experience, or they end up with worse issues. They end up relapsing or having other issues related to the treatment that they did receive, or treatment that they didn't receive. Oftentimes families come in because their loved one has gone in for treatment and been taken advantage of, and they're stuck with the bill. The difference between these costs are substantial at times.
So, I mean, you know, I'm not too familiar with the Affordable Care Act. Did you do, you know, your practice, Rosenberg Law out of Florida? Were you involved in much healthcare previous to the Affordable Care Act?
Well, what our office does is we represent patients and providers with healthcare issues where there are these disputes, where there is an issue. For instance, we represented one patient in a claim against the hospital for overcharging for services, that saying that it wasn't right. The amount that was charged to that patient was too much, even under the law regulating that service. So when people have our patients, whether it be families or patients or victims, have issues with insurance relative to charges or overcharges or inappropriate services. You have all different sorts of issues. You can have services not rendered, you can have overbilling, you can have underbilling, you can have a number of different scenarios. When patients have those issues, people come to us to help them to resolve those issues, such as somebody got overbilled, we'll come in and we'll try to help negotiate or to resolve the bill with the insurance carrier or the hospital in favor of the client. So that's how we're involved with these issues related to these companies. Oftentimes we have patients coming in with issues with rehab facilities because of these issues, such as overcharging or not providing the appropriate care.
I mean, it seems crazy that like these overcharges, at a restaurant, they overcharge you for an avocado. Okay, you can sort of deal with that. Like, who's monitoring, you know, whether or not the client is receiving these resources that they're being charged for? Like, who's responsible ultimately for that oversight?
Well, that's can be a number of different players. It could be, the Board of Health, all right, number one, because the Board of Health and the Department of Health, the Board of Medicine, Department of Health regulate the provider, meaning the rehab center, and they're supposed to comply with the laws that are in effect that pertain to the services being provided, the rehab services, the addiction treatment. And then also the insurance carriers, in a sense, also regulate, because they're supposed to be overseeing and checking, because when the bill is submitted, they're supposed to review the bill and they're supposed to issue an explanation of review that says, okay, here's the service that was provided, here's the amount that's being charged, and here's the amount that we're going to reimburse pursuant to whether it be per the contract or out of network or not. And here's what the patient portion, this is what the patient owes. So that's also part of it. But also, very importantly, the patient is also part of the regulation here, because the patient has to look at what they're being billed for, what they're being asked for, and they have to keep track of it. And they have to look at what's being given to them when they get that explanation of benefits, or when they see that services aren't being provided, or that they're being charged something that they shouldn't be. They have to speak up. They have to say something to the provider and clarify what exactly happened. Is it an accurate bill? And in the United States, under the Medicare laws, we have what's called the False Claims Act, where if we're dealing with a Medicare patient or a facility that provides care to Medicare patients, that it's called a whistleblower case, where if you have a facility that is billing the government for services such as rehab services, and they're not providing a service, or rehab then there is a lawsuit that's brought on behalf of the United States, on behalf of, it's called the Tem Law, and the government will go after that provider to collect back the amounts that were paid and to sanction the provider for violating the law. And in those cases, a reward is given to the patient or to the individual who whistleblows, who turns that provider in.
And Florida had some serious cases here with the Delray Beach. Like, has that climate changed in Florida where there was patient brokering by, like, it was just, it made headlines around the world, just what was going on. Is it called Boca Raton too, or I can't remember the others. Delray Beach in another city where it's like a recovery house, like it's just full of recovery homes.
I think you're referring to Delray is the area. There are others located, and regretfully, no. I think that the industry breeds that type of provider because it's easy to manipulate the system and to manipulate the patient base, because the patient base is recovering. They need to recover. They need help. And it's much easier to take advantage of somebody who needs help than somebody who is so, sober and clear-headed and capable. I mean, let's face it, when somebody is addicted and needs the help, not only is that person sick and needs help, but the family and everybody around, the whole support system is taken aback and focusing on that patient, that person. And that's a very simple situation where you see, a parent or a family member will lay out thousands of dollars to help their relative without really questioning, because this is really important. It's important to everybody involved. And so there's a lot of emotion. And because of that weakness in that situation, it's very easy to have the fraud take place and to take advantage of the patient and the family. But that's by unethical and fraudulent providers. Let's not paint the entire system as being wrong. There are many, good providers and rehab centers that actually provide really good and essential services to this population that deserve accolades for how they help people, and they don't do that. So,
and this is, kind of a warning for Canadians as well, because this isn't a US thing. And, in Canada, our healthcare is paid for. But it's interesting when it comes to the addiction and mental health, not just addiction, where recovery-oriented systems of care have become this kind of like an enemy to the healthcare. That's my experience. And the harm reduction services are touted as services that are funded by the government, and recovery systems are kind of falling where they're not. But this is what's happening. Private care is taken over that funded piece. So, fully funded programs have to be fully 100% harm reduction. And in a world where recovery-oriented systems of care are around, or where abstinence is kind of the goal of treatment, which people want for their kids, that's not being really looked at. And so what's happening is, when I started, working in this environment, a while ago, probably not too long, but probably about 14 years ago, understanding, probably 12 years of understanding how the system works, I didn't know any patient brokers. Now, like, there's patient brokers in Canada, and there's a reason for it, because families don't want their loved ones to go to the funded system that's fully funded by the government, because people are using drugs in there and they want them to go to an abstinence-based environment. So if you're listening, like, this is when you go to the ballot and vote for a party that never talks about recovery-oriented systems of care, but always talks about one type of care, such as safe supply, which is important to the overdose crisis. This is what you're going to get. You're going to get a splinter of the system. I just wish we supported all forms of care and let organizations do what they do best, and do it and be fully funded as well, because we're going to end up where you're going to need a lawyer like Bruce, because you're going to end up with all these bad apples in the industry, because there is an opportunity to make a lot of money. Like you said, vulnerable people, can be taken advantage of. So what is, we have listeners in the States, and we have, with our social media reach, we're all over the place. So if you're feeling that you've been taken advantage of, and you feel like, hey, you deserve a refund, or you might just want to be like, hey, I was treated wrongly, I want to complain. What can someone do?
Okay, great thing. Great. In the States here, what we can do is you can always make a complaint to the Board of Health. All right, meaning that if there is a professional, a doctor, or a facility that you feel has wronged you in any way, whether it be in bad treatment, offensive treatment, billing you for services that you didn't get, inappropriate conduct, you can either call up or write in, and it can be anonymous or otherwise. You can send an anonymous letter, or you can make a specific complaint to the Department of Health and to the Board of Medicine against that provider, and they will take that on, and if there is a basis, they will investigate and follow up on that complaint with the provider, and that can result in misconduct charges being brought against the provider, and it could end up in anything from a penalty to a loss of license to a major issue for those facilities or providers. Also, as you said, if you feel you've been monetarily aggrieved or damaged and you have a contract and a basis, you can go to a healthcare attorney, go to somebody who knows about these contracts, and see if you can seek recourse from the provider themselves. So there's a whole range of things that can be done, and it matters how you feel and what you want to do. But you shouldn't asking questions or making complaints is a positive. You should advocate for yourself. You should insist on having your rights respected, and don't let unscrupulous providers take advantage of you. Make a complaint to the government, to the board of health. Seek advice from an attorney, and don't become a victim again. Speak up and take care of yourself, and as part of your recovery process, help yourself some more, and seek out and get help.
I mean, Bruce, you're fighting for the little guy here. People that have been taken advantage. It makes me sick that that we're having this conversation, that this actually exists. Like you described, families in desperate situations, vulnerable people that, their mind's not right to make the right decision sometimes. And, the fact that big business and government can, produce an area that people can be taken advantage. It's just sad. And I'm wondering, it might be a bad for business question for you, Bruce, but have you, in your experience and working with, people and families that have been taken advantage, have you seen a pattern that would red flag for somebody that, is going towards a place that, is about taking advantage of people, whether it's a doctor, a GP that only provides one option of treatment? Is that a red flag? What have your experience taught you?
I think the most basic issue I've seen, and Giuseppe, you used the word, and this is a language, a semantic problem, okay? Because a lot of times we use words, and words mean different things for different purposes. So when you use the word broker, a patient broker, for instance, in Florida, patient brokering is illegal. You can't have a patient broker. There's no such thing in Florida as a patient broker, and the laws specifically provide that anybody who is found to have brokered a patient for any reason, to make a profit, for incentive, either for affirmative payment or for any sort of benefit, that's a crime, and as well as it's a violation of the healthcare law. So the first thing in the U.S. is if you get somebody coming up to you saying, "Oh, well, you've got a problem. I know where you should go, all right, or I can help you," unless they're a licensed professional or they're somebody working with a government agency who can direct you to a facility that is appropriate, that's a red flag right there. All right, unless of course it's somebody who's been to a rehab center and has been through the process and actually has personal knowledge that that's a good facility. People out on the street saying, "Okay, I can get you some money for, I can get you something if you go over to this facility." Anything that sounds like that, I would say try to run away from. That's a big red flag. So that's the most basic one. And, I know there are places, I guess, where patient brokering is acceptable, but that's not something that under Florida law is appropriate.
And one of the things is this is all solvable. It takes smart government and smart stakeholders to really, like, recovery coaching should be funded by the government. And if it was funded by the government, there wouldn't be this private market of recovery coaching and all that kind of stuff. Because people need to be coached. You can't, and it needs to be not in a little walk up to a counter asking for help. Recovery coaching is such a valuable tool, but the government's not even looking at it as a way to help solve people accessing treatment. So people go to Google, and Google's created its own algorithms where you can't even find. I don't know if you know the Google laws, but Google made it illegal to advertise it for addiction treatment. But what they've done actually is created a system where organizations that have a lot of bling have hired the best SEO content writers to bypass all their advertising laws. So now you've got these private money-making organizations creating SEO content. So, you have all these, places coming up number one on Google, not by advertising, simply because they hired the best SEO content writers. So, the solution is, for me, in my eyes, is to have people being recovery coached into an environment where they don't come across predators and don't come across organizations that have predatory behavior and that charge, a fortune and provide limited care. I'm not against private healthcare. Like, we charge for treatment here at Last Door because we provide a pretty good service. I always say this, and I'm going to end the show with this. People, sometimes attack private treatment, but my friend who died of an overdose, the government spent more money on him while he was in ICU in a coma for a week than they did his entire addiction treatment healthcare, because he was always on, on welfare and all that kind of stuff. So, we'll spend all this money at the hospital in ICU, but we never, would give him the supports he needed, like trauma therapy and all that kind of stuff while he was still alive. So we need some smart people in politics that really know what's going on. We appreciate you helping people resolve their issues that they have. So how can people find you?
Oh, obviously, Rosenberg Law, PA. You can Google us. We don't have algorithms like that, but I guess we have some SEO. We're here to help. Better to ask a question than not. If we can't help you, we'll try to point you in the right direction. Or, obviously, we're here and we want to see the right process and the right thing happen. So thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
Awesome, thank you. Awesome. We've been talking to lawyer Bruce Rosenberger about what's going on in the USA. Thanks for being on our show. And you can follow his Facebook, Twitter, and all that, which is on our website, www.talkrecoveryradio.com. Take care, Bruce.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care. And we're going to continue on. You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. And we are now going to continue on with our second guest, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Who is this handsome gentleman on our show?
Yeah, we get to talk recovery with Stephen Hall. Welcome to the show. We're here with your personal story. I'm just reading a little bit about yourself. You believe everyone is capable and worth recovering from addiction. I mean, beautifully said.
Thank you.
So how did you get from, where you were to that belief? I think is the important information.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Darren. Thank you, Giuseppe, for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. In my own journey, for years and years, and I think a majority of the listeners can relate, is I didn't think I was worthy of living any sort of life, of having any sort of freedom, achieving any goals. I had resigned probably in my early 20s to just die an alcoholic death, to be honest with you. And so it took me a number of years to get to a point where I finally started to believe that, hey, I do have a potential. I do have skills. I deserve to be part of society, right? And then throughout my course of recovery, One thing I've noticed, I work in a treatment center, and for most people that come in, that by the time they reach treatment, most people don't believe that they can. There's a lot of hopelessness, right? But I've seen a lot of people recover. I've seen that light come back in their eyes. And, for me, it took a good group of people to make me believe that I could do this, in the very beginning, that I could have a beautiful life in recovery and freedom that I've never imagined. So, today, that's what I like to give to the newcomer, trying to share that hope and give the same help that was given to me.
It's something like, as you said, the hopelessness to not see past, the life that people want for you or that you hear other people's describing. So much of this is my own experience, but it's just like, I know I have to stop addiction. That would be great if I could just stop that. But the reality is every time I got clean, I'm not the happy, hopeful person with faith and belief in this new life to come. I am the guy that needs alcohol, drugs, etc. to cope. What was your experience? Like, we talk about early recovery and needing a group of people. What do you think it was? Was it therapy? Was it just living life, in their common experiences, whether it's going for coffee or, what were some of the things that you got through that?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Darren. It was a mixture of things, right? So obviously, like, I'm in a fellowship, and I do the 12 steps, right? That has helped me immensely. Like, that has created a guideline of life that I use today. It's a great blueprint. But I also did use, therapy as well. So my counseling has been a big part of my sobriety or my clean time. But yeah, getting on to like that circle of friends I have, in my active addiction, especially towards the end, it was just me. I didn't have friends. My family had kind of written me off, things like that, right? So when I came into treatment and the fellowship, all of a sudden I had, this group of people surrounding me and saying, like, it's going to be okay. We're going to love you till you love yourself. And at first that was like, get me out of here. I didn't want to be loved. I didn't want to, I just wanted to be the lone wolf, but that changed as I started to recognize, I'm really good friends with a lot of the people that I was in treatment with. There's a lot of people that have just known me for my whole recovery. And, it was probably, 9 months into my recovery when I actually, my mental health became really bad. And I didn't want to use, but the thoughts of suicide were coming back. And it took one really close friend, my best friend I have today, that's also in recovery, he just said, what's going on? I care about you. What's going on? And I was finally able to really get vulnerable and like just peel back the layers of the onion, if you will. And in that moment, I felt so supported and loved, and there was some solutions that were suggested to me, which I did follow. And that friend of mine ended up moving in with him, and forming this relationship that I've never had before in my life. I've never had that, right? But that was around 9 months clean. But it really showed me that, hey, these people are legit. It's not, nobody's in here paying lip service. Birds of the same feather flock together, is something that I've really believed in. And I choose to be around the people that are really out there doing recovery, that are getting the help, that are, taking care of their mental health, physical health, medical health, nutrition, all those types of things, right? Because you can tell those are the people that are striving for a good future.
Right. So there's a really good hindsight, perspective there with your experience, with that specific experience of depression or mental health, or whatever the nomenclature is for that experience you were going through. Let's talk about there's this philosophy with abstinent-based recovery that it's dangerous. Obviously you're more prone to relapse if you're in an abstinent-based situation. Addiction specialists will say, I need a patient 100% abstinent off of any substances to be able to determine and give a real mental health diagnosis. They have to be clean. So quite often in an abstinent-based, facility, that's a great opportunity to have our mental health assessed.
Yeah.
And sometimes my own personal choice is, hey man, I'm clean. I you know what I mean? And I don't recognize my own deterioration.
Right.
And if I'm not seeing a doctor, if I'm, really righteous on my abstinence, things could hit a wall very dangerously. And whether that's your experience or not, but what do you think you could have done or should have done in hindsight? Could you have prevented that? Or would you have been just on medication the whole time and never have known, truly, what the secondary or primary, situations mental health wise were for you?
I think if I was going to go back and change anything now in hindsight, now that I have the experience I do, it would have been to get vulnerable. I do see my doctor. Like I said, I've gone to counseling and things like that. And, medication works wonders for a lot of people. And I think it's important, if you are going to be looking at medication as a potential solution, is to couple that with therapy and to make sure that you're talking to your friends, to your doctor, to your family, things like that. Because for me, like I said, in hindsight, a majority of what was going on for me at that 9-month period was I wasn't talking. I still wasn't trusting. I wasn't getting vulnerable. And once that opened up for me and I recognized, like, again, wow, these people are legit. They want to help me. My employer went, to the moon for me and made sure that I was safe and secure in my position there, and that they made my experience comfortable. And they didn't just turf me to the side, because that was another thing too. I was like, oh gosh, they're going to think I'm just absolutely crazy and I'm not going to have a job anymore. I'm not going to be in the recovery community anymore. I let this just build up.
So suicidal, but going to work, like,
yeah.
Got to show up for the job.
Yeah,
in this
right?
environment, the more crazy you are, the more valuable you are, I think. I mean, it's just, I'm as crazy as can be.
Yeah.
Steve works at Together We Can, another treatment center here in the Metro Vancouver area. And, everybody's trying to solve this overdose crisis, and they forget about the people. Like, I mean, they forget about the community, and I'm not going to go down the road of like what's not working, but it's just, what you're talking about is being part of a community, and a healthy community. I mean, there's a lot of communities out there. How do we get people inspired to be part of a healthy community? And that's what TWC does. That's what Westminster House does. That's what Last Door does. Turning Point, Intervisions. There's so many great organizations in Metro Vancouver, and it seems like we're always over here to the solution to the overdose crisis. And not only do we get people clean and sober, or whatever terminology you want to use, we help people become sons, daughters, fathers, mothers, depending on how old they are. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on when somebody shows up to one of these bed-based services here. And and that's what you're talking about. It's returning to sanity and so forth. And 12-step fellowships have a lot to do with it, but it's not all of it. It's everything else. I mean, I saw you this weekend at Pride.
Yeah.
I was running this way, you were that way, and that is, community. That is being part of something. I never, in a million years, I used to go to Pride when I was 16. And I was high, drunk, and living a very dangerous life. And if that's what you do during Pride, applaud to you. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. For me, it was a bad thing because I almost died a few times. So that's not an idea of a party. So the idea of having some sober fun during a highly intoxicated event for many people is just as big of a deal than anything. And so what was your experience over the weekend and so forth?
Well, first off, that was a fantastic event. I was so happy to be there. Yeah, so my experience with that is no different than you, Giuseppe. Everything I did, any sort of celebration, everything had to do with substances, right? And
Yeah.
so in my recovery here, like at first, and I think a lot of people can agree too, it's like, oh, I'm getting sober. I'm never going to have fun again. And that's not the truth, right? It's getting out there and interacting with other people in the recovery community, right? We're all unique individuals, but we get to come together under this awesome umbrella of like supporting each other. My experience this weekend, though, at that event was just number one, it was great to see friends. Great to see my friends that were there. They're in recovery. They're having fun. None of us are, using. We don't have to worry about tomorrow morning or anything like that. We're mindful. We're in the moment, right? When I left that event, though, I ended up walking down Davie Street and I had this weird feeling. And I was like, what is so different? And then I recognized that I was like, everybody's wasted around me now. And it just all of a sudden I kind of got into this like, oh, what do I do vibe? Like I just didn't like it. And again, if people if they want to use some things like that, that's their own thing and no different than you, Giuseppe. It didn't work for me. And that's why I am where I am today. But I felt so grateful to be part of a recovery community once I left that event and I was going back to my car. Well, we stopped for food on Davie. And I just thought, it reminded me of all the nights that I went overboard. I just went overboard and I hated myself for it the next day. So being able to be a part of the Sober Lounge event, Recovery Day, all of these different events that happen throughout the year, just make me so grateful that I am where I am today and that I have a group of people out there, regardless of where we're from or what treatment center we're at or what, if we're using the 12 steps or not, it's just a community of people that are trying to get better. And I love it. I absolutely love it.
And can you speak also, there's this event coming up called Soberfest. I believe it's on the island. What's that all about?
So Soberfest has been created. It's the first annual, so the intention is to have it each year. But it's 10 comedians and 10 musicians are going to be doing sets. There's going to be community booths and vendors, things like that down there. The point behind the Soberfest is, again, to bring people together. It is in Victoria, so there's not a whole bunch going on there. So it's, they're trying to increase the number of events. But again, it's for the recovery community to get together, but also shed light on mental health. So the Billen Foundation is one of the sponsors behind the events, the presenting sponsors. There was a fellow, he was in recovery and he died by suicide. And so the Billen Foundation has been created to help artists and people in recovery with their mental health. And so the Soberfest is actually a fundraising event for the Billen Foundation and then for future events as well, because they want to do Soberfest each year. But again, it's a great opportunity for people to come together in recovery, get down there, see some shows, interact with each other, make new friends, see old friends, get out there and get that community, get connected.
Awesome. And so what's the date of that again?
August the 27th.
August 27th. If you're in Victoria or want to travel to Victoria, check that out. It's taking place. It's all over Facebook, so you can take a look at it or just contact Steve at TWC and he'll get you some information on that.
Yes.
So, you do events as well and their work, and you know how important volunteers are and all that kind of stuff to getting things done and so forth. There's this thing that happens, after an event where you kind of reflect on it and you take a look like, what's your experience in regards to your personal recovery? Because you've got your anonymity and you've got your anonymous program and how do you balance that out? Like, how do you end up like, this is my time, this is us time, this is work time, because it gets all kind of
It
you
gets
know, in the
really
blender, mixed together.
yeah.
You know, for example, you know, sometimes it's awkward to go to my home group sometimes. Like I didn't go on Monday because it was the day after Pride, and it just would have been all about Pride. And I was just like, I'm going to bed. So I would say that's the healthiest way to deal with it, but that's what I did, and I don't care what you think. So what do
Yeah.
you do?
Honestly, I can relate totally, Giuseppe, on that
Yeah.
blender, and so I've had to really learn how to set clear boundaries, is like, okay, if I'm at my home group, I'm at my home group because we'll have a lot of people from the treatment center attend my home group and they're asking me questions about the treatment center. But this is my home group. I'm not here to work. So trying to set those boundaries, but whether or not, there's been times where I have sat out of certain things too, because I just, I need me time. I need to reflect. I need to do self-care, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. When it comes to like my fellowship and things like that and my work, those two can get combined as well, but it's important. What I try to remember is like, regardless of who I'm working with, or if somebody's there with 1 day clean or 30 years clean, we're all just addicts, trying to get better. And I try to keep that focus as well. The difficulty that I experience is when you're trying to manage other people that are in recovery as well, because those, if they're part of the 12-step fellowship, it's like we're very equal, but now we're at a work event. And so trying to remain like empathetic and open, and that good communication is super important for me. But yeah, there are times where I'm just like, gosh, I don't know which hat to put on right now. And I get a little confused, but a lot of the time too, if I just express what's going on for me, people tend to understand that. The other piece too is I was always the loudest person in the bar, and so I recover loud as well. And so I've always been a very loud person, and I talk a lot. So I like to let people know that recovery is possible. Again, it doesn't matter which modality you're using, or if you went to treatment or didn't, or any of those types of things, right? It's like, just get out there, get connected, and go to these events and talk to the people that are out there doing it, that are part of the community.
Yeah, I always say if you're not, you have social anxiety, or you just don't want to be around a lot of people, and you don't know what to do standing at an event, then volunteer.
Yep.
Do something like be the just do something at the event and say, hey, I want to help out, because there's always areas where people
There's
need help.
we always
Um,
need help at events.
always
Yeah,
need
for
help.
sure.
So do that, and eventually and gradually you'll end up realizing like it's okay. Like everybody else in the room feeling the same way probably, and
Well, you
they're
get
just
you
at a
get to
different
talk to other
phase.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a great way to get involved and to just talk to other people, and you can make friends out of that too. So even if you're just helping with a cleanup, it's
Well,
important, and it will be good for you.
so remember, recovery is possible, sustainable, and it can be fun.
Mhm.
And it's up to you to make it fun. It's up to us as individuals. I like to also say, what, like part of recovery is understanding like life's not meant to entertain me. Like I got to be part of the show, and it's such a better way to live, because I used to like, you better entertain me or else, now it's just like, yeah, whatever. You're
Yeah.
listening to Talk Recovery Radio every Thursday, noon to 1. We're back into show mode after 1 month of being off. Don't forget, Untoxicated, August 13th, New West Pride, Naomi Smalls, Evie Oddly, Aquaria, Brooklyn Heights, Kendall Gender, Brat Pack. If you don't know who these people are, you're missing out. Google that shit, because you want to be there. It's going to be a fun show at New West Pride on, when is it? August 13th. And Steve's going to be there. Recovery Day, September 10th in New West, 10th anniversary, Recovery Day, bc.ca. 2 stages. If you got kids, bring your kids. There's a giant kids zone, like best free entertainment you're going to get out there for your kids. So check out Recovery Day BC. TWC is one of the stage sponsors as well. So thanks for that. And Darren, it was good to see you.
Great to be back. Good to see you.
All right,
And
we'll be
thank
back.
you to our guests, Stephen Hall and Bruce Rosenberg.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Awesome. Take care, everybody. See you all next Thursday. Bye, Steve. Bye, Darren.
Take care. Thank you.